So the Sonicware SmplTrek was a really cool, really good piece of new gear. I'm going to tell you why I didn't keep it. So I'm going to make this quick. This isn't meant to be a full review or a feature on the SmplTrek. If you're curious about its full capabilities and reviews on it, there's dozens of videos from other creators to check out. This is just going to be my reasons that I chose not to keep it around. Out of the box, the unit feels really nice. The pads are a little small, which I'll touch on again in a minute, but overall it feels great to hold and to use. I wish the blue and orange navigation buttons were plastic and clicky as it looks like they should be, but they're the same rubbery pad-like buttons as the rest of the buttons. The unit in total is a little bit bigger than the kind of Game Boy-esque device that they sell it as, but it's definitely still usable as a handheld piece of gear. Once you get a handle on actually using the device, it does sound very good. The sample polyphony is great. There are a lot of effects that you can use to process your samples or apply to the whole project. There are a few different ways that you can record your beats and multiple ways to use the sequencer. With a 32 gig memory card, you can keep a pretty respectable size sample library on hand as well. There's a few big issues that I have with the SmplTrek. First off, the screen on the unit is very small, especially considering the overall size of the thing. If you're watching this now, you probably know already that some of my favorite pieces of gear are the Novation circuits, Teenage Engineering pocket operators, pieces of gear that basically have no screen at all on them. It's not that I'm helpless without a screen to look at to see what's going on, but the screen size does become an issue with the workflow of the unit and the amount of reading that you need to do when looking through folders of samples, the menu diving that's integrated into the workflow, and when it comes to fine-tuning your sequences. The SmplTrek has been compared to like the Electron Digitact or Digitone or the Roland MC707 when it comes to how much menu diving is involved in the workflow. It honestly became a strain on my eyes really quickly when I was using it. The next reason that I had for not keeping the SmplTrek around is really the big one, the significant one, and that's the firmware, for a few specific reasons within that. Some other creators have said when it comes to this thing, firmware with bugs and quirks is one thing and that can be expected, especially with a brand new product, a brand new piece of gear. But firmware that just isn't finished is something else entirely. The SmplTrek release was delayed a few times from its initial expected release date and didn't start shipping to Kickstarter backers until about 2 months later, I believe. Still, the firmware is incomplete. There's no really other way to put it. For example, the looping feature was something that was missing from the firmware entirely. That was a big feature that they had boasted when marketing the device that has since been added to the device. One thing I was personally disappointed about was that the multi-track export was not available and is still not available. The next big downfall when it came to the firmware for me, with any other gear that's sold as a sampler, Sonicware needs to expect that people would be using it to make one type of music, one genre of music in particular, which is hip-hop beats. As such, the firmware had two big problems when it comes to making hip-hop or things related to that. One of them being a lack of global swing, and the other only having one quote-unquote drum or slice track. As far as the swing is concerned, yes, there's an option for micro-timing per step in the sequencer, but that requires going through your whole sequence or project and setting that beat by beat. So adjusting it later, if you wanted more or less swing on it later down the line, when you're fine-tuning and finishing up your track, could take a long time to change that. But only having one drum or slice track was more problematic for me. It means that you can either only slice up a single sample, like a chord progression or melody, or a drum break on your project, but not both. If you wanted to do both, you could assign individual slices of a sample to one of the tracks on your project, but your tracks are limited to a total of 10. One of those can be the quote-unquote drum or slice kit, but the other ones would be for an individual sound or an individual piece of a sample. So if you are either breaking up a drum kit into 4, 5, 6 different individual hits, or you're breaking up, say, a melodic sample or a chord progression into 4 or up to 8 or even more different slices, you're eating up your available 10 tracks on your project in total very quickly. So even the most basic of hip-hop beats, being just a drum sample or just a melodic sample, sliced up, and reassembled into your new beat, that's already taking up a lot of your 10 available tracks. So if you wanted to add, for example, bass, additional percussion, another melody on top, you don't have a lot of extra room to assign those things to. I don't know that it's possible with the hardware limitations of the SmplTrek to add another drum or slice track to the available tracks in the project, but if there are one feature that I would like to see implemented on a future update, that would definitely be it. The last and another really big reason for me letting go of the SmplTrek was the lack of any kind of fun or performance factor. Both as someone who just likes jamming buttons and turning knobs sometimes to make sounds and see what comes out, as well as someone who wants to have interesting content to post to YouTube and Instagram, SmplTrek doesn't really offer anything like that to me. Yes, there are effects which can be applied to individual tracks or the whole project, like beat repeats, filters, etc., but there isn't really a good or interesting way to manipulate or play with those in real time. And yes, you can finger drum on the unit using the pads, but the pads are a little bit too small to do so, both because it would be hard to play accurately consistently, long enough to get through a whole finger drumming video, and it'd also just be kind of hard for someone to see what's going on and see what you're doing. The reason why videos with gear like the Novation Circuits, Rhythmo Beatbox, SP404, or even just the effects on pocket operators is that they look cool and give the person something to do while making that video. You're twisting knobs, finger drumming, there's lights flashing, you're applying cool effects to your track or your song in real time, but the SmplTrek just doesn't have a lot to offer in the way of visual content. It's something that I noticed both in trying to make my own videos or when looking at what other producers had posted when they had posted videos of their tracks made with the new unit. This might seem like a superficial or a shallow excuse to not like a piece of gear, but again, I want to make content that's fun for you all to consume, and more importantly, I want to have fun doing it and playing with it. So all in all, the SmplTrek really is a good piece of gear if you can get around its limitations and its workflow. There are a lot of reasons to like it, it's just not for me. For gear in a similar price range, I'd stick with like an SP404, something like that. I love the circuit tracks and the circuit rhythm. I'm going to keep playing with those. If you want something a bit more robust and complete in what it can produce, I'd even look into getting like an MPC-1 or an MPC Live 2. Right now you can get one of those used or refurbished for around $500 to $800 on eBay, depending on which one you're looking at. I understand that's might be almost twice of what the SmplTrek costs new currently, but that offers you a much more complete production unit, has an easier workflow, huge full color screen, big pads to play on, etc., at least until there's some major changes made to the SmplTrek firmware. If you all have any more detailed questions about the SmplTrek or the things that I mentioned here, or if you think that I'm just completely off base and out of line with the points I've made here, let me know. Let's chat about it. As always, if this was helpful or enjoyable to you at all, just like the video, subscribe if you haven't already to see what I cook up next with some gear other than the Sonicware SmplTrek. Thanks.